Hello everybody, today we're going to be looking at Cormac McCarthy's The Road, something that is kind of viewed as a classic, and happy to say I definitely enjoyed this book. I will go into, you should read this if you want a literary piece of work on the survival and relationship of a father and a son, slowly treading through the post-apocalyptic world without any gimmicks. If that sounds interesting to you, you will definitely enjoy this. And I say literary piece of work because this is definitely a literary piece of work, and it's an experience. This book is definitely an experience. Some people are super crazy about this book, say it's one of their best books of their lifetime, and I think maybe some people are a little bit lukewarm. I'm somewhere in the middle. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars, meaning very good. A couple of things. I think you do have to be in a good place to read this book. You do have to understand that this book is an experience, and the way I kind of summarized if you should read this, keep that in mind. This book is essentially the relationship between a father and a son, and them surviving in this post-apocalyptic world and slowly treading through it. Again, there's no gimmicks, there's no action-packed sequences, there's nothing of that sort. This is just them slowly treading through this world. Marvelously done. Cormac McCarthy obviously knows how to write, and this is, I suppose, he kind of like a love letter to his own son in some ways. And there's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot to love here. But again, this book is an experience, and I think that's why I'm in the middle, where for some people this can really be a life-changing book, meaning if you're someone with kids, or you're kind of reading this at a good time in your life, you will really be impacted by this book. Whereas I think if you're kind of coming off of reading a lot of fast-paced, action-paced science fiction epics, fantasy epics, I don't think this book will hit you in the same. So it kind of really depends on where you are in your life, in my opinion. And I think that kind of put me in the middle of the both. And so I think we should start with plot and structure, which is where I gave this book the highest rating, which is 4.75 out of 5. There's been few books that I've read that kind of provide the somnolence, the kind of longing of human contact, the dreariness, the loneliness, the solitude, I think is the right word, the solitude of a post-apocalyptic world, especially like a father and son like this book did. It's probably the best way that it's been done, especially in such short word count. You feel this solitude, you feel that kind of grind of trying to survive, and that grind as a father trying to protect and provide security for your child, but while trying to be on the road and just being hungry and being protective and being cold and the grayness of this world. I have to read this quote. He walked out in the gray light and stood, and he saw for a brief moment the absolute truth of the world, the cold, relentless circling of the interstate earth, darkness implacable, the blind dogs of the sun and their running, the crushing black vacuum of the universe, and somewhere 2 hunted animals trembling like ground foxes in their cover, borrowed time and borrowed world and borrowed eyes with which to sorrow it. This book is impeccably written in this kind of way. Again, this relationship between the father and son, and there's some literary narrative choices made here. For example, this book doesn't have chapters. I actually didn't notice it until I watched another book review, but when I was reflecting on how I was feeling while reading this book, it absolutely, you get caught. You are also day to day just grinding with these characters because it's a bit choppy. Not choppy and bad, meaning you wake up or they walk to this place or they walk to that place. You are also walking with these characters, and I really love that choice of not having chapters. It's essential for when you're reading in this book, and there are some choices like that again, that solitude and that structure of, and I suppose that's the author's intention, is he wants you to feel this solitude to the point where you feel the depth of a father's love and the horror of a father's love to keep going. And then when the child is kind of punishing the father for some choices that he makes, you feel the hopefulness of the child and the light of the child, and that kind of counterbalance between the darkness that the father feels, and trying to keep that light alive in his kid. I think in this way it's very, very powerful, and a lot to unpack. And again, I can understand the word boring, because again, I think that's why it's essential that you read this book without the wrong expectations. This is not a dystopian book. I think that's the wrong characterization, and that will give the wrong expectations, which can lead to this book feeling boring, because you are just kind of on this path of following the child, but these two characters. But if you kind of go into this thinking, okay, this is going to be a book about a father and son in survival, then that kind of expectation, and also that this is going to be a literary piece of work. Maybe that's a bit too elitist for me to say. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but maybe that an author's love letter to a father and a son's relationship in a post-apocalyptic world. I think then with those expectations, you're fully going to experience this the way that it's meant to be. Again, I can understand how it feels boring, because that dreariness is the intention, and I guess that lack of movement sometimes that is kind of enhances that solitude. And I definitely think upon reflection, there's a lot to think about for this book. So it's a great I really enjoyed that kind of plot mechanism. And I didn't really like the ending. I can't give it a perfect, or maybe it should even be a 4.5, but looking about the plot and how it fits into the overall objective and narrative, the author does a great job, which kind of goes into the weakest category, which is characters, which I only gave a 3.5 out of 5 stars. And this kind of goes back to narrative choices that were never given the names. And I think that's a great choice. And that choice won't be for everybody. Not knowing your characters' names is essential, I suppose, right? Like, I'm also a big character first reader. Like, it's hard for me to a 5 out of 5 book without me loving the characters or being super attached to the characters. You're not going to get that here. That's why I gave 3.5 out of 5, but you will become attached to that idea of parent relationships to their child, especially a father and a son. So in that way, the book works well. You're not going to be super attached to the characters because there's not going to be a whole lot of depth to them, but there's enough depth to them that it provides, I suppose, for that relationship where you become attached to that idea or that concept of a father and a young child living in this post-galactic world, and that relationship of push and give, of risk-taking and not risk-taking, and reflection of surviving, and these kinds of things. So 3.5 out of 5 without reason that the author would do that. And then that goes into prose and dialogue. I think prose-wise, there's a lot. I gave that 4.5 out of 5. Just from that paragraph that I wrote, things are described very well. Things are, again, that feeling of solitude and horror, moments of horror, and that the moment of tension. I really thought that those were well described. And again, the author makes some choices with the prose to provide for the solitude and loneliness and hone in on that relationship. So I think these are good choices that the author made. For world building, I gave 3.75 out of 5. World building, in the sense, it's an odd category, right? Because for this book, because on one hand, you fully feel the solitude. And I suppose now that I'm reflecting, well, what if the world building is the solitude? Because when I think of world building, it's like, okay, the characters that are living in this world, for example, some science fiction planet or this island or whatever it may be, world building means how fully ingratiated do you feel into this world? How fully invested? How encaptured are you by this world? How much can you imagine yourself being, and how engaged are you in it? And so this is an odd one to rate because the world building is solitude. And in this way, the author excels in providing that feeling of the world building is solitude and survival. On the other hand, of this post-apocalyptic world, it's quite bland, and perhaps those two things are interacting with each other on a purpose. So now for my taste, I like more advanced world building. You know, I love me a Sanderson building. I love me a Sun Eater building, Expanse world building, and these kinds of things. And so that's why I can't give it a below average score. I have to give it somewhere in the middle where, okay, the world building is solitude. The world building is dreariness, darkness, and that excels, but there's not a lot of depth to the world that the characters are living, but there's a lot of depth to the world that the characters are feeling. And I think that's essentially where the two crossroads lie. We'll go next to emotional impact and thought-provokingness and themes, and I gave that 4 out of 5. I do think this is one of those books that everybody should read based on the kind of characterization I gave to it. Read this book at a good time for you, that you think is a good time for you, and you will feel something, and you will get something out of this book. And again, some people might find it boring, and that's okay too. But I think some people, and some of you will be really emotionally impacted by this book, and you will really feel the darkness. And there are some moments here, like the basement, let's say, that really horrifying and but so grounded in reality that I think you will get a lot of emotional impact. So I'm kind of in between. I gave it 4 out of 5. Goes to fun, which is always a odd category for this kind of book, but I gave it 4 out of 5 as well. And so maybe instead of fun, we can say enjoyment, where I definitely enjoyed this book. I enjoyed thinking about this book. I enjoyed the solitude. I think it was at the right length. There were definitely some moments where, especially towards the end, why I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, where it did feel like, okay, now we're just going from point A to point B without there being any like advancement in the plot or advancement in the characters. There was a little bit of that for me. Can't give this like a perfect book or a below average book. That's why I'm kind of in the great category. I almost gave it a 3.75 out of 5, but upon reflection, I think after reading, I would have gave this 3.75 out of 5, but I try to review books a couple days or at the most a week after I read them. So to give a little bit of time for reflection. And so upon reflection, I said, okay, no, that kind of sits with you a little bit. So 4 out of 5 enjoyment level. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think this is a literary masterpiece? Did you find this boring? Are you like me, where you're kind of in the middle, where some parts kind of dragged on, but they didn't kind of take away from the objective of the book? So yeah, I would say everyone should give this a try, because again, I do see elements of this because this came out in 2006, I do see elements of its impact where I'm not sure this kind of book, I could be wrong, existed beforehand, where that kind of on the ground grittiness, darkness, directness, and lack of world building, but purposely so existed. And it might have birthed a lot of the advent of kind of more of these grimdark, not just fantasy and science fiction, but more grimdark atmosphere. It might have been one of those kind of, let me know if I'm wrong, but I do think based on the timeline here, it was one of those kind of first books to do so. So yeah, I would definitely say give this book a try. I do think it's taught in high schools for a reason, and this is my first Cormac McCarthy book, so I look forward to reading some more. So let me know what y'all think in the comments.